Hello, everyone. The title of this presentation is The Art of TradeStation, and more so, customizing studies without programming. So we're going to go over some utility in TradeStation, which allows you to do some customization of studies in TradeStation without having to know a lot about programming. But before we get started, I just want to go over this disclosure. Keep in mind that every symbol and idea that we talk about in this presentation is for educational purposes only. TradeStation does not make any recommendations, and we should all be aware of the risks that are associated with trading online. If you'd like to read more about these disclosures, just go to the TradeStation's website, and at the bottom of the page, you're going to find all the disclosures there if you'd like to read more about them. So I'm showing you the TradeStation platform, and let's pull up a symbol here. So I'm just going to go to Trading Apps and pull up a chart. All right, this is a chart of Apple. Let me go ahead and resize this window so that it covers the whole area. I'll press my up arrow key a few times here so we can get a full chart. And let's start by creating some indicators. First of all, I'm going to insert one of the default studies here in TradeStation, which is a moving average one line, and we can make some modifications to that study from the get-go. So I'm going to go here to Insert, go to Indicator, and then click on Moving Average one line. All right, let me open this up a little bit. Here it is. And I'm just going to insert it the way that it comes by default on TradeStation. So once I click OK, that's the way it looks. The line is very thin. You know, in my personal use of TradeStation, I tend to make the font a little bit thicker and the lines also a little bit thicker because they're, easier on the eyes. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to double click on that line. And in the Style tab, I'm just going to make the width just a tad bit bigger. And I'm going to set that as a default. Every time you make changes to any study, if you want to make those changes the default, just make sure that you set or you click on the button that says default. I click OK, and now you can see how the line is a little bit thicker. It's easier to see on the screen. Now, if I go to the inputs section of this study, you're going to find that there's different parameters that as a TradeStation user you can modify and change of this particular indicator. Moving average is a simple study, but notice how the price that it's using is the closing price. So instead of the closing price, if I wanted to do an average of the opening price, and then I just click OK, you see how the line shifted a little bit because now instead of using the closing prices to average them, it's using the opening price. Now I can take this one step further. Let me go ahead and modify that study. Let me double click on the line. And here, I'm just going to type in a formula. I'm going to open up the parentheses. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all the price points, create an average of that price, and then average the averages so that we get an average of the averages, not an average of the closing prices. So I'm going to take that open, and I'm going to add the high, and I'm going to add the low, and I'm going to add the close. All that inside parentheses, so we have an addition of all the different price points, and I'm going to divide that by 4. Okay, so this is going to give us an average. If I plot the moving average the way it is right now, it's going to create an average of my formula, whatever the result of that is. So on every bar, I'm going to take all the 4 price points of every candle or every bar, create an average of that by using the formula that I just typed in. And then the moving average indicator, the study, which is already programmed, it's already created for us, is going to average our formula. So once we click OK, the line that you see right there, it is an average of the average prices of each bar. That's pretty cool that you can take, a formula that is custom and add it into the inputs. And the syntax is very similar to what you would see in Excel. Most of us, use Microsoft Excel have used it for many years. So the way that you type in formulas in Microsoft Excel is very similar to the way that you type in formulas here in a chart analysis window. So feel free to go into studies, and wherever you see the price and it says close, you can pretty much take that word and change it to anything else. So let me go back in there. That is the average of all the price points. Let's say, for example, you want to see the high plus the low divided by 2. Now, this modification, instead of taking all the price points of every candle and creating an average price for the candle, this is finding the midpoint of the bar. So it's taking the high and the low, adding them together, and then dividing it by 2. So now you're creating an average of the midpoint of every bar. I click OK here, and there it is. There's a small modification that happens. I'm not sure if you were able to see how the moving average shifted, but the ability for you to go into the inputs of any study and be able to modify these inputs to whatever you want, whatever formula you want, I think it's very powerful. So we talked about modifying studies without programming. So we haven't done any programming, and we're able to modify the study to do something completely different than what it was intended to do when it was created and installed on TradeStation. We're going to take this class and show you different examples of what you can do with the built-in studies that are in TradeStation. So in the list of studies or the list of analysis techniques that you have in your platform, you also have a series of techniques that are meant to be customized. In fact, the name of these studies have the word custom in them. Let me remove this study that I have in here. I'm going to just click on it, right, and delete it. I'm going to go to the Insert menu and go to Indicator for now. If I scroll up to the C's, you're going to find 4 in the Indicator tab: Custom 1 line, Custom 2 lines, 3 lines, and 4 lines. In this example, let me use the Custom 1 line. And I'm going to show you something very cool. I'm going to use the Custom 1 line. It already comes with a formula built in that you can modify. That's why it's called Custom 1 line, because it's intended for you to provide the formula. I'm going to click OK. And you see how the line shows up at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to make it thicker so it's easier on the eyes. All right, so let me just change the thickness, set it as a default. All right, there it is. So we have a calculation going on right here at the bottom of the chart. If I double click on the study and I go to the Inputs tab, take a look at the formula. This is taking the close minus the close of 10 bars ago. There are certain things that you need to know about EasyLanguage. When you see the word close, and that word is followed by a number 10 inside square brackets, that just means that you're telling TradeStation to go back in history that number of bars. So if you have, in this case, I have a 5-minute chart. You can see it right there in the background of the chart. This calculation is taking the close of the current 5-minute bar, and then it's going to go back, bars back, take the closing price of that 5-minute bar in history, and then subtract it from the close. So when I look at the number here on the far right, this negative 0.08, that is pretty much telling me that the closing price right now, it is about 8 or 10 cents lower than what the closing price was 10 bars ago. Very, very cool. You can do all sorts of calculation here. So let me show you a couple things. Let me double click on this study. I'm going to show you some other reserved words that you can use. For example, close D and 1 inside parentheses. You have to be careful of when using parentheses, the rounded ones and the ones that are square brackets, because there are some words that do require the rounded parentheses. The one that you saw before had the square ones, and that's a historical reference, you know, how many bars ago. This particular word that I'm typing in, which is close D, it's pretty much telling you to plot the close of the day 1 period ago. Okay, with that 1 inside parentheses, it's telling you 1 period ago. If I click OK here, let's see what happens. This is a line that is giving me the close of 1 day ago. The close of this symbol, by the way, I'm looking at Apple. If I look at the close of yesterday, the close of yesterday was 199.80. So it grabs the close of yesterday and it plots it as a line right here on the screen. Ideally, I can use that line and put it right here on top of the screen. So let me take that line, I'm going to drag it and drop it right here on top of the bars. There it is. So when you look at this particular study, which I just clicked and dragged and dropped it on top of the bars, it's plotting the closing price of the prior trading session and putting it as a horizontal line. And you can see how the current, market data relates to that price. If I, compress the chart a little bit, it's doing that for every single period. And that way you can see where the closing price is. Whenever this happens, and this is something that I do to studies like this, I like to modify this so there's no lingering diagonal line from one day to the next. So what I do is I change the style of this line sometimes. Let me go back in there, double click the line. It's not taking me there. So let me right click on the line, go to custom or format, custom one line. And the style, instead of being a line, sometimes I use crosses. Click OK. That way, it doesn't have that weird line connecting one session to the next. You just see the crosses going across the screen, letting you know where the closing price is. Now, I can modify that study again and say, in the Inputs tab, what if I change that 1 to 2? It's pretty much going back 2 trading sessions and giving me the closing price of 2 days ago. Let me click OK. And now we are looking at the closing price of 2 trading sessions ago. The closing price was $195.57. The current price is $199. How interesting that is. Now make a note. Let me go back in there. Make a note of this word because I find it to be very useful. Close D. And the same way that we have a closed D, we have a high D, low D, and an open D. 0 being the current day, and 1 the prior to 2 days back, and so on. Let's take a look at another example. Let me remove this one. Okay. Let me remove this custom one line. I'm going to go and add it again. Insert, indicator. And let's go ahead and add that custom one line again. Okay, it shows up at the bottom. Remember, there's a default calculation to it. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a comparison between 2 symbols. I'm going to change the symbol here on the top, and I'm going to make it euro dollar. And I'm also going to insert another symbol. So let me go here to the insert menu, insert symbol, and I'm going to insert the British pound against the US dollar. So I have the 2 symbols on the screen. Now I can change the order in which these subgraphs appear, because I have the euro dollar at the top, I have this indicator in the middle, and I have the British pound US dollar at the bottom. I can move the British pound to the top so that it's higher than the indicator, and I did that by clicking and dragging. But what I want to do is I want to modify that line, that yellow line at the bottom, so that it uses the value of those 2 symbols that I just inserted. Maybe create some sort of a ratio between the 2. Divide one into the other. Let's create a ratio and see what happens. The way we do that is by modifying the study that I have here. So let me go ahead and customize it. And again, we go to the inputs. Here's the formula. I can say close of data 1 divided by close of data 2. Data 1 is always the first symbol that creates the chart. And data 2 is the second symbol that you add or that you insert. As you add multiple symbols, TradeStation will assign a number to that data stream. Once I click OK, the line changes. So that's the ratio between the 2 values. But I'm doing this exercise so you can see that you can take any data number and make all sorts of calculations and create an indicator that follows the value of those 2 data streams. In fact, if you're not really sure what data number is which symbol, maybe you did some formatting, maybe you changed the order of the symbols, and you can't really remember which symbol is which, go to Format Symbol. When you go to Format Symbol in a multi-data chart like the one that I have, it's going to give you a list of every single data stream that is in the chart. In this case, I have data 1, which is the euro dollar, and I have data 2, which is the British pound against the US dollar. So again, another example where you can use multi-data analysis and these studies to make all sorts of calculation. So let's take a look at another type of indicator. I'm going to remove this line. Okay, and I'm going to remove this other data. Remove the British pound. So now we're only set to the euro dollar. Let me show you something really cool. I'm going to go here to Insert, Indicator. And for this other exercise, I'm going to use a custom two-line. Okay, the custom two-line shows up as an indicator at the bottom. That's fine. Let me double-click on the line so I can modify it. And notice the inputs. You have a formula for line 1 and a formula for line 2. At this moment, the formulas are the same. So when you look at the indicator, it looks like it's just one line, but there's two lines in there. First of all, let me change the style because I want those lines to be thicker and I don't want to forget it. Let me make that a default. In the inputs, let's say, for example, that I make the formula for plot 1 the high and the one for plot 2, I'll make the low. When I do that and I click OK, this is what this looks like. I'm going to click and drag that indicator and drop it on top of the bars. I do want the same axis as the underlying data, so I'm just going to click OK. And this is what it does. You know, we just changed this custom indicator, and we said, I want one line to be the high and one line to be close. And one line to be the low. So that's exactly what it did. You can see that it created a channel just connecting all the highs and connecting all the lows. Now, let me take this one step further. Let me go ahead and double click here because I want to create an average of the highs. A lot of times, you may want to use a formula that's already built into the TradeStation engine. There are some mathematical formulas that you don't have to create from scratch, like average. Let me show you how you can access a list of components that you can add here into any of these fields. I'm going to go here to the dictionary. This dictionary button that you find here in this dialog will take you to the EasyLanguage dictionary. We're not going to do any programming. We're just going to open up the dictionary, and in the dictionary, there's a scroll bar here under category. I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom and select user functions. User functions will give you everything that you can use. Let me give you an example. A simple average. I highlight the word average. The dictionary is great because it provides you a way in which you can use it. Here's an example. Take a look at how the function is used. You have the word average, and inside parentheses, you have the value that is being averaged and how many periods is it being averaged for. Very simple and very straightforward. So every time you come here to the dictionary and you're interested in using one of these words, take a look at the example because it tells you how to use it. Let me do something here. I'm going to take the word average. I'm just going to type it in there. Average. I'm going to open up the parentheses. I'm going to create an average of the highs for 30 bars. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing here for the low. Just type in the word average. Open up the parentheses. I'm averaging the lows for a period of 30 bars. Very simple, very straightforward. Now, what I do recommend is that you go over to the dictionary and find things that you may be interested in doing. Average is a simple function because in parentheses, you just have to tell the value that you're averaging and how many periods are you averaging by. Once I click OK, take a look. So now instead of the line, connecting the highs, I'm taking all the highs and creating an average. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at another study that you can modify. I wanted to show you something a little bit more interesting. Let me switch this chart to Apple. Okay, so I'm just going to type it in. Okay, so I'm looking at Apple. Let's pull up a daily chart. So I'm going to go here to, I'm just going to type in daily. Okay, so that's a daily chart of Apple. In this daily chart of Apple, I'm going to pull up volume average. So I'm going to go to the Insert Indicator dialog. This is one of the built-in studies, by the way. Volume average. I'm just going to prompt for format just to make it look nicer on the screen. I'm going to go to Style. This is a histogram that I'm going to make very thick. The volume average, I'm going to set it to thick as well. And I'm just going to put it right there at the bottom. Okay. So that's the volume average indicator. You can see that it's an interesting idea because you have an average volume right here on the far right. You find the average is about 21 million. The current volume is 10 million. It would be ideal, though, for you to be able to identify any single day where the volume exceeded the average by a certain amount. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to insert a study in TradeStation that will identify a bar, look at its volume, and if the volume is greater than the average by a certain factor, I want that candle to be identified or marked. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go to Insert, but this time instead of going to Indicator, I'm going to go to Show Me. In the list of Show Me's, again, you're going to find one that is called Custom Show Me. The same way that we found a custom indicator in the indicator list, we have a custom Show Me right here in the list. I'm going to prompt for format and click OK. Here's the formula for this particular Show Me. The Show Me is looking for a high that is less than the high of 1 bar ago. I'm not sure if you see that here. High, less than high 1 bar ago, and low greater than the low 1 bar ago. So you're looking for an inside bar. The previous bar was bigger. Now we can change it. What I'm looking for is for bars that have volume that exceeds the average by a certain percentage. How do we do that? Well, again, we already know the average function. And I'm telling you that the word you would use for volume is the word ticks. So I'm going to type in ticks is greater than the average ticks for a period of 50 bars. Now, if I type just that in, ticks is it's the actual volume, the number of shares being traded. That is going to be averaged for 50 periods. That average is going to be compared to the current volume. And if the volume is greater than that amount, it's going to mark the bar. Let's go ahead and make some very interesting markings. I'm going to go to the style, make the dots very big. And the color, I'm going to make them, let's make them cyan. I'm not sure if you see the actual dots on my screen, but every time that there's a volume bar that exceeds the average, I'm going to get a little cyan dot. In fact, let me see if I can make those a little bit more clear. Let me format that Show Me. Let's call this a point. Don't want to change the style. Let's do a cross instead and see what happens. Okay, a cross is a little bit more clear. You can see that on every candle where the volume exceeds the average, I get a cross. Ideally, you would not put, the cross right on top of the candle, but you get the idea of what the Show Me is trying to tell you. And I just wanted to make it as big as this one so that you could see it. Now, let me go ahead and refine that idea, because every time that it crosses the average, I get a marking. I did want to create some sort of a factor, because I not only want the volume to be over the average, but be over the average by a certain amount. So let me go over here to the settings of this study. Wrong dialog. Let me go here to Format Custom Show Me. Go to the inputs. Okay, that's what I typed in, but I'm gonna add a factor here. So I'm gonna multiply this by 1.5, and the current value of volume needs to be greater than that. And I put everything in parentheses just to keep everything organized. Once I click OK, take a look at my chart. You see a lot of those crosses disappeared because I'm not only looking for a crossover on the average, like over here, we see this green, we see this red bar crossing the average, but it doesn't quite meet the criteria, as opposed to this one over here that exceeds the average by 50%. So that's the one that I'm marking. So a custom Show Me is a great tool for you to add a formula, and TradeStation will be able to mark all these bars that are showing that specific criteria. Interesting exercise. Let's take a look at another indicator. So let's, in this particular case, I'm going to use the concept of RSI. Let me remove the volume indicator right here at the bottom. We may not need it. And one of the things that I find is that as you add these custom studies to the chart, If I'm looking for a volume breakout, I may not need the volume indicator at the bottom anymore. So I can probably remove it, and I still have that study telling me that whenever volume exceeds average by 50%, I'm going to have that marking on the current candle. And you can see it historically as well. Let me insert one of the built-in studies called the RSI. I know a lot of you use the RSI in your studies. So let me just change the style so that we can see a thicker line. All right, so there we go. The RSI is at the bottom. But what if I don't want to use real estate for that RSI? It's using up a big section of my chart. I want to be able to color the candles a particular color if it meets certain criteria based on the RSI. And that's what we're going to do with one of our custom paint bars. Let's go here to Insert. So now we are going to select a paint bar. And the same way that we found custom studies for indicators and show me's, we're going to find a custom paint bar in here. I'm going to put a check where it says prompt for format so that it takes me to the format dialog before it goes on the screen. And this is the criteria, very similar to the one for the show me, where it's looking for an inside bar. But I'm going to remove all that. And before I do so, I want to use an RSI calculation, which is also built in. This is something that already exists on the platform, and we can look for it in the dictionary. You're right. So I'm going to go to dictionary, look at my user functions, and I'm going to look for RSI. There it is. So RSI, I highlight it, and I look at the example. And take a look at how the example is written. I'm just focusing on what I'm highlighting, RSI, and inside parentheses, you just have to supply what is the value that you're calculating the RSI on and how many bars or how many periods you're going to be using. That's all you need to put into that field, and TradeStation knows what to do because RSI is already created as a function. It already knows what to do. You just have to supply those parameters inside parentheses. So what I'm going to do, let me cancel out of this. I'm going to remove the formula that is in there, and I'm going to say, I want to paint the bar whenever the RSI of the close for 14 bars, which is the default function. Notice that I'm just typing exactly the function as it appears in the example, which is the default calculation. And I want the RSI to be greater than 70. So once you calculate the RSI and you find something that is greater than 70, I want you to paint the bar. What color? Let's check. The color is, I'm going to choose this magenta. Once I click OK, there it is. Take a look at this swatch of candles. This swatch of candles are all painted magenta because they're all above 70. Take a look at the RSI indicator right here at the bottom. Anytime that you see those red lines at the bottom, your bars are painted. So now there's no need for me to keep an RSI here if I'm looking for, overbought, because every time that the RSI displays an overbought value, I have my paint bar painting my bars magenta. So I can see it right there on the candle. Now I'm seeing two analysis techniques without having them on the chart. I'm looking at volume, where I see the crosses, and I'm looking at RSI by painting the candles. All right, let's take a look at one last exercise because I know that we are running out of time, but I want to show you something that you can do on RadarScreen. Let me open up a new workspace, and I'm going to pull up my RadarScreen window or application. RadarScreen's right here. Okay, for this demo, I'm just going to use the sample list of symbols here. So I'm going to use my custom symbol list, and it's going to add it right here to the screen. Let me resize these columns so that we can see more of them. For now, I'm just going to keep it the way it is. Let me make the font a little bit bigger because I want you guys to be able to see the font better. So let me make that bold. All right, there we go. So we're looking at this screen. I know a lot of you use ATR as a value to calculate stops and targets, because ATR pretty much is the calculation that tells you how the prices have moved historically and have an idea on how they are likely to move going forward. So let's go ahead and add an ATR here. So let me go to Insert, Indicator. I'm going to use the default one first, and then we'll create something, a variation. Here we have average true range. Let's move it down. Okay, and here's the calculation. Okay, this is on 5 minutes, so let me change the interval to daily. So we can do a daily ATR. Okay, so there it is. We have the average true range. This is the average true range for each one of those symbols that I have here. I have Amgen, Apple, Cisco, a lot of symbols, stocks that are very common. And this is the average true range being calculated in real time. Now, this is the raw average true range. For example, for Apple, the Apple value is $3.49. So in the past, whatever the calculation parameters is, in the past 10 days, Apple has moved about $3.50 in average. Now, to be able to calculate the stop, you have to take the closing price and maybe go down this amount. But what if you want to create a factor of that average true range? Let's say you want 2 ATRs or 3 ATRs, or maybe just a 50% of the ATR and set that as your stop. You'd have to modify, and create your own study. But let me show you how you can use a custom study to just put in the formula. I'm going to go here to Insert. I'll do Indicator. Let's look for custom one line, and I'm going to add it. All right. Now the custom one line, we know that that has its own default calculation. So I'm going to have to right click on the header, and I'm going to format custom one line for all symbols. You can see the formula in there. We talked about this earlier. It's taking the close of the current bar and subtracting it from the close 10 bars ago. That's what the formula or the default formula is. Let me use the average true range formula. If you don't know what the parameters are for average true range, again, we go to the dictionary. Let's take a look at average true range here. You go for user functions, average true range right here. And let's see the use. See how it's being used right here? Average true range, and then a number in parentheses, which is pretty much the number of periods you're using for the average. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to plot the close. I'm going to average AVG true range for a period of 10. If I do that and I click OK, this is what it gives me. Now, what is the average true range setting here? It's 14. I mean, we can use 14 just to make sure, just to be consistent. So let me go here and say 14 and say OK. So now you can see that we created our own custom one-line indicator that matches the default one that comes on TradeStation. But I'm going to take this one step further. I'm going to come over here and modify the formula so that I can, first of all, multiply this by 2 if you want to use 2 ATRs. And then I'm going to take the closing price. So I'm just going to type in close and then subtract this amount. I'm just going to put all that expression inside parentheses. So you notice what I did? I just took the ATR calculation, multiplied it by 2, took the closing price, and subtracted 2 ATRs. When I click OK, here's what you have. A real-time calculation of what your stop would be if you're using 2 ATRs. So if you're trading, let's say, Apple, that is trading at 199.98, your 2 ATR stop would be 192.99 if you're using an ATR for the past 14 days. Now, that is very powerful, and I find that these studies, you can modify on the fly without knowing programming or EasyLanguage. We haven't even gone to the development environment. We did take a peek at the dictionary to see how these functions are built, but that's what gives you this ability to modify these custom indicators and find some very interesting studies. it's great to be using TradeStation in today's markets because I believe TradeStation is a platform that provides you all the flexibility that you need in order to take your trading to the next level. Sometimes it's easy to follow what other people are doing, especially if they're giving you tips on how to analyze the markets. But it's so much better for you to analyze the markets your own way, not only being able to analyze the markets your way, but also have the tools necessary in order for you to create these types of studies and analysis techniques that allow you, to identify certain market behaviors. So thank you everyone for your time, and I hope you have a great afternoon. Don't forget to join us on our future events. Bye-bye.